Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a bi-weekly program on KSQD Santa Cruz. In today's program, we will be discussing electrical vehicles, or EVs. I'm here with Michael Saint, who will give us an update on grants and rebates at the end of the program. Although I bought my own EV, a Bolt, in February of 2021, I wanted to learn how someone else goes through the process of deciding which EV to choose and why. I asked Michael and Adrienne, a prospective EV owner, if I could ride along on her test drive in a Tesla 3 owned by Michael. Following is an edited version of the ride-along and conversation with Adrienne and Michael. Picture us in a parking lot and Michael showing us how to get into his Tesla 3.
Everything you want to do on this car you can do with the iPhone. Okay, you can open it up right now and I can go on the screen and open the trunk and stuff like that. But you see the Tesla app here?
Yes.
If I want to unlock the car, I push that button and that's unlocked right now. If I want to open the trunk, which we're going to do to put your stroller in there you go.
Wow.
Okay, and that's your charger, which we won't go into now. We can talk about that a little bit. That's the portable one that comes with the car.
Oh.
Okay. All EVs have those.
Oh, good.
Okay, so you know where the levers are. Go ahead and use those to where you feel comfortable with the pedals and stuff like that.
Once inside, Michael shows her the dashboard screen and all the settings.
Regenerative braking, you have two choices. Standard is full, which really slows you down quickly when you let off the gas. Mm-hmm. Not the gas, the throttle, because we don't use gas. I consistently forget that.
Oh, yes, okay.
Okay, so then you could do the standard, which I use, because what that's going to do is regenerate more power back into your battery when you're not using it. Okay. You're letting off the gas and coasting, you're braking, you're going downhill. Then if you're standard regenerative, you're going to get more juice back in the battery.
After we reviewed all the settings, we're off with Adrienne on a ride.
Makes sense. So you control the speed of the car with the gas.
It's called one pedal driving, which is just with your accelerator.
So many people control the speed though with the brakes.
Well, you have to in a fossil fuel car because it just keeps rolling.
Well, that's true.
And after you drive these electric vehicles for a while, you'll get used to not having to put the brake on so soon, or actually even using the brakes. So it's just something you get accustomed to. Matilda, you said something about your Bolt and how you've gotten used to the regen. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How you feel? Are you comfortable with that now?
You know, I actually think it is an adventure to really gauge when I should take my foot off the pedal to stop exactly at the stop sign. Don't you think so, Adrienne, that's an interesting thing to do?
I agree, because this time it stopped smoothly.
Your destination is on the right.
And this is not your first time that you're driving an electrical car?
No, it's the third time, actually. It's just a matter of getting used to it. And I like it more each time I try it, actually, yeah. Yes.
Since we're here, we're back at Eric's Deli. The only thing we have to do, since we have the iPhone as the key, we just open the door and walk away. And it'll beep the horn and fold the mirrors for you. And then you're all done.
Quick exit. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. When we navigated back to Eric's Deli here, but that we didn't really need it. We knew where Eric's Deli was. But if you go on a long trip and you're going somewhere, always use the navigation, even though you kind of know where to go. Because what happens is the car knows when you're going to stop. And for you to charge, they want to precondition the battery and get it to a nice temperature to accept the electricity. So if you're navigating, it'll do that for you. Otherwise, it doesn't know.
Wow.
You'll get to your destination with a kind of a warm battery. You'll stop, and what happens, the car will keep kind of running because it wants to cool.
Oh,
and you're going to be using your own battery to cool the car instead of the charger.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so just little things. You'll pick that stuff up as you go along.
So you're talking about the battery needing cooling. Can you tell us a little bit more in general about the cooling of the batteries between the different brands?
Every manufacturer has their way they want to think of cooling. The best is active cooling, and that's done the best, I think, by Tesla because they run coolant between each individual cells. Cars like Fiat's and Chevrolet Bolts and some of the other manufacturers that are less expensive, they will just maybe cool a section of each battery. All the cells are in these one little packets type thing, and that works pretty well. I think that's the way Bolt does it. Fiat 500s, they have more of an old school, even though it works well, they run their coolant through a radiator, and thus they're blowing cool air over the entire pack itself. So different ways of cooling, and unfortunately Nissan has elected passive cooling, which is air only. So if you go on a long drive, running your battery heats the battery. Once they stop, the temperature is going to rise in that battery and just sit there and basically somewhat cook the cells. And so their batteries gotten a lot of degeneration over the life of them, and so they don't last quite as long. Try to avoid quick charging or supercharging as much as you can, because that also heats the battery a lot quicker. Those are the two things that batteries don't like.
Adrienne, may I ask you how you got started?
Actually, all my life, since I was about 20, which was quite some time ago, I have always wanted an electric vehicle. I can remember very clearly saying to my friends, we're standing at a gas station, why don't they just make an electric vehicle? And here it is, 50 years later, and I saw the ad in the paper for the webinar that was online regarding grants for electric vehicles, and I actually couldn't believe my eyes, and I tuned in, and I've listened to 3 or 4 of them, and now I've been talking to Michael Saint and learning more and more, and I'm just thrilled that it's becoming a reality, and a reality for me.
And did you apply for the first grant?
Yes, I did. I applied in, I think, December, and it came through by the end of February, and they're just waiting for me to decide what type of vehicle I want. Yeah.
So you're in the second phase for that.
Yeah.
I understand you got a $5,000 grant.
Yes, I did.
Michael, how does this work with this whole grant? Because I understand there's more grants.
Once you use that grant, that's actually at the dealership, so it's basically just a down payment. Once you've made your deal with the dealers, then you give them the grant, and then they get the money sent to them from the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program from the state of California. They also will apply $1,500 from the Clean Fuel Reward Program for the state. So right there she has $6,500. And then after she gets the car home, she can apply for 3C Energy, which is our local power procurement company, and that's going to be $2,000. And so that's up to $85,000. And then Monterey Bay Air Resource Board, if she buys after July 1, they're coming back into the EV incentive program as well. Theirs is $2,000 also. So there's lots of money out there. She's up to about $10,500, $8,500, depending on what time she does buy the car. And I have helped people that have gotten the used cars. The older one, first generation Leafs or Chevrolet Volts, Fiat 500s, Chevy Sparks. Pretty much almost a free car, anywhere about $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000. They can get a really nice car. Low battery range, but yet enough for around town and short trips. So those are the incentives available, and there is rumor that the infrastructure plan that Biden's putting out, if that goes through, he is also putting out another federal tax credit incentive to buy electric vehicles. So if you want to buy an electric vehicle, 2021 is a really good time.
You are working with Adrienne because you have the title ambassador. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, there's a few people that have ambassador titles. Primarily, I started this 4 years ago just on my own, not meaning that other people around the country haven't done stuff like this, and then I got involved with Ecology Action on their ride and drive programs, where I took my electric vehicles there and gave people demonstration rides, and just kind of fell under their wing. And they thought, well, here's COVID-19 last year, what are we going to do? We can't do ride and drives anymore. So they called me up and said, I think we want to do what you're doing. And we're going to go for a grant from Electrify America that is for EV awareness, education, that type of thing. And Ecology Action got the grant. And there's Regeneracion, Romero Institute, and Community Environmental Council down in San Luis Obispo are part of that grant as well. So we started webinars last year, and I've done about 7 or 8 of those. Also still get referrals from people from me doing it the last 3 or 4 years. So that's how I became an EV ambassador.
Adrienne, how did you get to choose Michael?
Just got lucky.
I have to agree with him. I just got lucky. I went to the first webinar, listened to it, and then I immediately called Sabrina back and asked for Michael's contact information because I didn't realize there were other ambassadors. I did get lucky, I'll tell you.
You mentioned Sabrina, and she is from Ecology Action.
Yes, she is. Sabrina Delk. And she gave me the information. And I contacted him, and he's right on it. And I always feel like I'm dragging my feet. I'm sorry, I don't know which one I want yet.
Do you have the feeling that electrical car is the final car that you want to drive till you can't drive anymore?
I think so. That's why I'm sort of going for it with a Tesla. I just love the whole idea of being all electric, no gas at all. Yep.
And you mentioned there are right now 40 brands that have put out electrical vehicles.
Yeah, there's 40 models, I should say. I mean, there's not really 40 manufacturers, but at least 40 decent models out there. And they feel 21, and 22, maybe into 23, there's going to be about another 100 models coming out, specifically from the actual manufacturers. I think the Bolt, GM is going to put out 30 models of cars. That could mean, various types of the same car, but, long range, short range, mid range, that type of thing. Different types of options available, that kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot of choices in the next 2 to 3 years.
Including trucks and SUVs?
Yeah, trucks are coming out. There's 3 coming out this year. The Ford F-150's out, and I understand that's pretty awesome. Rivion's putting a truck out, and of course Tesla has its truck coming out as well. So the prices on those are starting at about $39 and going all the way up to $65,000, $70,000. So yeah, you're going to see more trucks, more crossovers, SUVs, because that seems to be the popular car in the United States, and so there'll be plenty of those. So I think it's really going to start blossoming quite well.
Now, when you started, you said 4 years ago, was it out of concern for the environment? Was it out of the technology and adventure into something new? What was it for you?
Well, 4 years ago for me it was environment and having hybrid for a while. And I was just retiring about 6 years ago, and a lot of it was based on income and money. I said I'm going to have kind of a fixed income, so I figured I need to cut my costs to make up for the loss of the income I had before. And so utilities was a big cost, electricity and that kind of thing, as well as maintenance on cars. So I said, these electric vehicles don't have that. And then I put solar up, and now I don't even pay for the electricity to charge the car. So I'm saving quite a bit. I think on my Chevrolet Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid, over the last 5 years I saved $3,500, not counting maintenance. That's just in fuel costs.
I hear you say maintenance. What kind of maintenance can people expect when they have an electrical vehicle?
Okay, I'll give you 2 examples. I've had 3 electric vehicles. I had the Prius hybrid, then I bought a Chevrolet Volt, and then I have a Tesla Model 3 now. So I've put about 300,000 miles on those 3 cars total over the last 8 to 9 years. So over those last 9 years, I've never put any brake pads on any of those cars or had a brake job. So if you times that times a fossil fuel car, it's quite a bit of a savings. There's no mufflers, there's no hoses, belts.
No oil changes.
No oil changes.
And is there brake fluid?
No brake fluid. They're electronic braking. It's regenerative, so you don't wear out your pads. It's just there's nothing in there. I guess they've compared parts in the fossil fuel car to like a EV. You have about 20,000 moving parts and pieces in a fossil fuel car. I think the Tesla has about 150. You'd put in washer fluid, and then you do have to change the coolant, but I think it's every 100,000 miles. So.
Now I see you shaking your head. Is this all new to you?
Michael just said something. The brakes, I guess. That's wonderful. Yeah, imagine not having to go in and get your 10,000 mile checkup, 20,000 mile checkup, and so on and on and on.
So you're hearing more things. What was the original idea, and maybe has it changed over time for you, why you want an electrical vehicle?
Well, I've always been interested in the environment. That was very big for me, having the electric vehicle. And then, of course, it's always nice to save money and save time, not having to gas up all the time. It's really about the environment for me, and I think for most people.
Is there anything I didn't ask or anything that came to you that you say, I want people to know this because you're in this stage and I assume other people are wondering if they should. What is there they really should know, you think?
What does kind of scare me a little bit is how many miles it'll go before I need another charge if I wanted to take a long trip. And it seems like that's all covered. In a way, it's like letting go of jumping off something and not having that tether to hold you, which would be the gas station on every corner. This is like free falling and it's quiet. I just really can't wait to try it for myself. And it'll be a way of life. Yeah.
Cool.
Anything, Michael, that you feel that people might want to know or should not do, or any questions that you think should be answered?
Well, there's tons of questions. You know, a lot of them are the same a lot of times, but there's always one or two that come up that kind of throw me a little bit. But what I do is I'll just research that and figure out how to answer those questions. Primarily, the thing I want to remind people is that 90% of your charging is going to be done at home. So that resolves the issue of having a gas station on every corner. You don't have to go there and get the smell in your car. You don't have to worry about a spill or it gets on your hands. The thing that's always bothered me about the fossil fuel industry is they only offered us one way to power our cars. And so that's a monopoly. And I think that's an important thing to get away from. And that's about it. The charging thing and the range anxiety I totally understand. But now that I've been doing it for so many years, it's really not an issue. I mean, you get used to everything. It is a big change for people, but if you like change, it's great. And the cost. People don't realize the cost savings. They think it's just battery versus gas, but like we talked about, it's maintenance. And once you get the incentives, you can actually get these electric vehicles for comparable price of a fossil fuel car or less. So should not be anything to hold people back.
I like that term, range anxiety, because I do suffer a little bit from that.
All right. Well, thank you both.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
This is Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD 90.7 FM. You just listened to a conversation I had during a test drive in an EV with Adrienne and Michael Saint. I'm here in the studio with Michael Saint and would like him to give us a little bit more information about the ways EVs get charged, and then after that, some information about incentives and rebates.
All right. Thank you, Matilda, for having me in today to talk about electric vehicles, one of my favorite topics. Considering the charging availability and how to get your car loaded up with electrons, primarily we have 4 different types of charging: level 1, 2, 3, and also the Tesla supercharger network. Level 1 is basically your home charging. You can charge any EV at home with 120 volts, just like your normal outlet in your home. But it's very, very slow. You're only going to get about 4 to 5 miles every hour of charging. This can be appropriate for the lower range, older generation 1 electric vehicles like the Nissan Leaf. Also maybe the Chevy Spark, anything under about 100 miles or so could be charged on 120. Also at home, if you do have solar, that's excellent because basically you would be charging for free. So you got your power tank on top of your house. Level 2 is primarily public charging, and this is kind of the area where people will get a little bit nervous about. That is a 240 volt, so twice as much as your 120 at home, and a lot more amperage too. So that will be about 20 to 30 miles of charging. And I also have to emphasize that the limit on the amount of miles per hour you get is actually the onboard charger of your electric vehicle. So depending on that, that's somewhat of an average. So take overnight on the low-range vehicles about 3 to 4 hours to get charged. And any plug-in hybrid can do level 1 charging and be fine. You would not have to buy a level 2 charger for your home. The next one up is level 3, and that is primarily all public charging. That's called quick charging, and cars that have the quick charge feature, Bolts, Hyundai Kona, your Kia Niros, you can get about 80% charge in about 30 minutes at a level 3 charger. And there's two types there. There's the CCS, which is the combined charging system. Those are primarily the American-made cars, GM, and European cars. And then there's CHAdeMO, which is also a level 3, and that's primarily your Asian electric vehicles. And those will both usually be there at the charging station for you. Now we go down to Tesla, which I think is just a different animal from these other three. This is a supercharger network, and this has been supplied by, of course, Elon Musk and Tesla, and no other car can charge there, but that's changing. He is going to be offering the total network to all other manufacturers, probably by the 1st of 2022. And he will supply an adapter at the actual charging station, so you'll be able to plug in the standard charging plug that most other electric vehicles have. So that's pretty much how you get everything charged up. If I can count on one or two hands how many times I did my Volt plug-in hybrid over 5 years, I think I used a public charger maybe 8 times. So realistically, most of the charging will be done at home.
So let's talk incentives and rebates, because I understand since we did the test drive, things have changed somewhat.
Well, it really has, and it's like weather. If you don't like the weather right now, it's going to change. And the same thing about EV incentives and grants and things like that. They do change a lot. They do run out of money at different times, and then they start it up again. That seems to be an issue with anybody, state, local incentives and everything. I think the best thing is to start at the federal and see what incentives are there for our electric vehicles. And presently, there's a $7,500 tax credit for new electric vehicles. And they call this non-refundable, meaning that you have to have a tax liability to receive up to $7,500. If you don't have that tax liability, you will receive what's less than that. But if you have zero tax liability, you do not get a tax credit. Tesla and GM are presently not included because they have sold more than 200,000 EVs in the U.S. And cars purchased in 2021 would have to claim their tax credit on their 2022 tax forms. And I would really emphasize that you check with your CPA or tax consultant to get the exact information that you need. We have good news. The changes on that tax credit, and I'll just mention a few of them, but it's pretty involved. It's going to eliminate the 200,000 car limit, and they're going to increase that to 50% adoption nationwide of EVs before that EV incentive will disappear. So that's going to take several years. And that's retroactive to May 24th, 2021. So if you bought a car after that, you will be approved for that tax credit next year. That could be as high as $12,500, and that depends on whether the car was made in the U.S. and also if it was a unionized electric vehicle. And the big thing, I think, is it's a refundable credit now. It eliminates the tax liability limit, and this helps low income and all levels to get a full refund no matter what your tax liability is. $2,500 for used electric vehicles may be in the package as well, which is very good. And one thing I thought was interesting is no Chinese electric vehicles qualify. Politics. Let's drop down to the state. That was federal. We have a recent clean vehicle rebate program. It's actually 10 years old. It ran out of funding. It was refunded on September 15th, and that's new cars also. In general, a pure EV gets $2,000, and if you are low income, which is below 400% of the federal poverty line, you'll get an additional $2,500. So that's $4,500. And if you were to get a plug-in, it's about half of that or a little bit less than that. I mentioned grants and rebates. The difference is a grant is given to you first, so you get it awarded, and then you take it to the dealer and you use it as a down payment. Rebates and incentives are after you purchase the car. So these are kind of two grants that we have. California has what they call the California Clean Fuel Reward. That's $1,500, new cars only. And it also depends on battery size. They will reduce that if you have the smaller batteries. That is also dealer applied. The next grant is called the Drive Clean Assistance Program, what we call the DCAP. And unfortunately, it's only for 12 counties. It's $5,000. And it is low income again, the whole grant, 400% below the federal poverty level. And there's only 12 counties qualified, all the 9 counties in the Bay Area. And fortunately, Santa Cruz County is also included. Also, they are also offering home charging up to $2,000, and that includes the charger as well as installation. I would like to include our local incentives as well. Locally in the Tri-County areas, which would be Santa Cruz, San Benito, and Monterey, these rebates are new and used. And the two entities that do that, the first one is 3C Energy, which is our power procurement entity. They are also $2,000 for a new EV. And if you drop down to used, it would be half of that. It would be $1,000. You can also double that for low income, but it's a bit lower than the state and CVRP. It's based on the Care Fairer rates, which is right around 225% of the federal poverty level. The next one is Monterey Bay Air Resource Board. Very similar program. One was based on the other, so it's pretty easy to figure out. That's $1,500 for a new EV, and for a used one is $750. One thing that MBAR does, which I think is really good, they'll also accept private party sales. Say you wanted to buy one off of Craigslist or your friend, they will honor that as well. Also being done is plug-in hybrids as well as electric motorcycles too. One additional thing, which some people like to do, California has a car recycling grant, also depending on income. If you're below 225% poverty level, you'll get $1,500. This is called the Vehicle Retirement Program. If you do not qualify for low income, they'll give you $1,000.
Well, thank you, Michael. That's a lot of information. And where would you say people can go to get a summary of what you said?
People can go to Monterey Bay Electric Vehicle Alliance, which is mbiva.org, and get all this information for themselves. Thank you.
So that would be mbva.org. Thank you again, Michael, for all the time you've spent with me and Adrienne, both on the test drive and here in the studio. And thank you to our listeners on Exploring Santa Cruz at KSQD 90.7 FM.